Hello, I'm Ed Fuquay, Young Adult Librarian Extraordinaire here at Woonsocket Harris Public Library.
And I'm Michaela, human being, here at Woonsocket Harris Public Library.
Yes, we're still in the Studio Road here, our exclusive filming studio here at the library.
I like all of our rectangles and squares.
We have a lot of rectangles in here.
But yes, today we're getting to talk about War of the Worlds.
War of the Worlds, one of the first science fiction books and one of the best.
Yes, oh my God,
It's never been out of print. It's been on, school reading lists for a long time.
Yeah, oh my gosh.
I read it when I was a child. I read it again as an adult, and I read it again just like last week preparing for this.
Yeah, oh, it's a very different book when you're a kid as opposed to when you're an adult.
It is one of those books that I find new things in every time that I read it.
Yeah.
Do you have a quote?
Let's open with one of the opening quotes from the book. No one would have believed in the last years of the 19th century that this world was being watched keenly and closely by intelligences greater than man's and yet as mortal as his own. That as men busied themselves about their various concerns, they were scrutinized and studied, perhaps almost as narrowly as water with a microscope might scrutinize transient creatures that swarm and multiply in a drop of water. Yes, we are being watched right off the bat.
It's a powerful, evocative opening paragraph, one of the most famous in literature.
Yes, it is.
Easily recognizable. It's hard for us to imagine here in the 21st century the impact this book had when it first came out. There had been talk of alien life on other planets before, but no one ever took it seriously, and no one in the world of literature had ever tackled it like this. And there had been a whole series of things called invasion literature. Mm-hmm. People of England, despite being in charge of the British Empire and running most of the world, felt oddly vulnerable. So there was a whole series of books in which England was invaded by a military power, usually Germany or sometimes Russia or occasionally China. And these all followed a similar course. And so Wells did one better in all of those by having aliens invade from another planet. An idea so mind-boggling, no one had ever thought of it before, let alone write a really good book about it. It is a powerful book. It is highly evocative, strongly emotional. Reading it, the death toll he describes, the destruction and so forth is incredibly powerful.
Absolutely insane. It's just people bursting into puffs of smoke where someone once stood. And I love the way he describes the weapons that the invaders have, because he actually, we were talking about how he would take things that were rooted in science fiction. They were focused how a lighthouse would have that type of mirror that would focus light. Yeah. They were focusing heat. And that's how he described the heat guns. I do have an exact quote if I can find it. But basically, it's like lighthouses. It's like lighthouses, that type of mirror.
Yeah. And again, not only had lasers not been invented, no one had even thought of the idea before, some kind of a focused heat beam. Same thing with poison gas. People had tossed around the idea of poison gas or even germ warfare ultimately, but no one had ever done anything with it. And then suddenly there's Wells using it as this fabulous idea in a work of science fiction. And also remember, he wrote this 10 years before the Wright brothers had the first heavier-than-air flight. So he's imagining interplanetary travel.
Yeah. No, well, even that there's a great description of what actually falls to the Earth, and how everybody thought it was just a meteor, and then people actually start going down, and it's this big, long metal cylinder of this metal that nobody's ever seen before, whitish and yellow, that he describes it, and the top is just slowly
unscrews.
Slowly unscrews because the metal is still cooling, and just the attention to detail, the fact that he did root it in, there is science fact mixed with the science fiction, it makes it such a, even though it's completely far out there, and we've been to Mars now. We know that there's no there's no tentacle-like creatures.
Sadly,
unless you look at the water. But but it's still it was a feasible fear. That people had after this book came out.
Yeah, the whole idea of an alien invasion, he invented the concept.
The fact that ships will come down and basically they're not green in War of the Worlds, but the little green men that come with them, he invented it.
He makes it work, right? Being it sound so realistic. And one of the things I like about it best is it would be easy to just say, well, the aliens have these like powers and we can't defeat them. But he actually goes into details as to how the Martian machines operate, the mechanism that they use. And they are defeatable. They are mortal. They are vulnerable, just like humans are, to various things. Several of the tripods are completely destroyed during the course of the story. Not enough to turn the tide of the war. Famously, the Thunder Trial manages to down 2 of them in a river. Yeah, a really well-written scene. And one of them he sees destroyed with an artillery shell. The filmed versions almost always cut to the chase. They leave out the early parts that build all the suspense. Mm-hmm. You know, if you didn't know that England was a very smug, imperialistic power who's basically running the world, he tells you that in his first few chapters.
Oh, yeah. Well, even before, the aliens start coming out, people are like going down to check out this thing that fell from space. They're walking with their sweethearts. They're taking a promenade. They want to see this strange thing
people
that fell from the
selling,
sky.
Ice and hot dogs and things like that. Yeah.
It's like it feels very much like a state fair in those opening chapters.
That's the overconfidence that he saw in the people around him, that they really couldn't imagine how harsh the world could be because they were growing up British at a time when the British Empire ruled the world. The concept of hubris, having too much pride, he definitely saw that around him, which is why they don't take the Martians seriously. Even when they discover there are Martians, which is, of course, a stunning revelation.
Yeah. The narrator goes running, but there are people fighting their way closer to try to get a good look at what's coming out. Mm-hmm. It's the hubris. The hubris. You deserve to be heat rayed to death.
Well, I mean, they've traveled from one planet to another, which is something that people on Earth can't even imagine. But instead of being impressed with that, when the Martians come out, because they can barely survive in Earth's gravity, they're flopping around and using their tentacles to drag themselves across the ground. The British would say, oh, they're powerless. And then when they use their heat beam to kill several people, they go, well, they're dangerous, but they can't even leave that crater. Yeah. So no one is bothered by their presence. They have superior weaponry, superior technology, but the British still can't quite get it through their heads.
Yeah, no, it's... Well, especially, it's England. It's the land of the colonies.
Absolutely.
The sun never sets. It's just...
Yeah, the narrator gets to watch it all, and he has this... He admits to the reader that that he feels distance from events. He describes things unemotionally.
Yeah.
He's detached from what happens around him, probably because of the shock that he goes through shortly afterwards.
Yeah.
But the people of England watch these aliens pull mechanical apparatus out of the inside of the ship and then painstakingly assemble it in the middle of their pit in full view of everyone.
And they're eating hot dogs. Yeah. They're eating hot dogs. And
then suddenly you realize they're building a tripod that can walk, that's like 20 feet tall. And they go, I wasn't expecting that, What did you think they were building?
I thought they were building something nice for this nice carnival that we have going on. A nice Ferris wheel, perhaps.
They never send out like a representative from the government.
No, there is none.
It's just the Army shows up eventually, like 2 days after the impact. The Army shows up.
More towards the end of the book, you start to see a response.
Yeah, it is not until like later that you see a full-blown like Army at work.
Yeah.
But they're very blasé about the whole thing. They just can't be bothered by it. They're British, after all. What could possibly harm them? Oh, the giant tripods with heat rays. Yeah.
The heat rays, yes.
Yeah.
They just turn people into flaming piles of smoke. It's fine.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. I'm trying to find a good quote. They're all good quotes. We must remember what ruthless and utter destruction our own species has wrought, not only upon animals such as vanished bison and the dodo, but upon its own inferior races. The Tasmanians were entirely swept out of existence in a war of extermination waged by European immigrants. In the space of 50 years, are we such apostles of mercy as to complain if the Martians warred the same spirit?
Exactly.
Like we were touching on, it is very much a book about human nature. Yeah. And, I like how the Martians, there's an actual reason for them coming.
Yeah.
Their planet is cooling. It is
they need resources.
They need resources.
The same way the British need money, which is why they invaded India and China.
Yes, and we want trade routes over here. Whereas, their planet is dying, and they just see this planet as something teeming with life. They can't speak the language. They don't know. Basically, we are animals when they come here. We are no different than the deer and the rabbits.
And it specifically mentions the American bison and the dodo. Yeah, you can analyze War of the Worlds a lot, but basically Wells tells you exactly what the book is about in that paragraph.
Oh my gosh. And
he's
there's
pretty
tons
obvious
of them.
about it because he knew the kind of public he was writing for. He wasn't writing this for intellectuals. It was for the very common man to read and go, that's interesting.
There's about 80 quotes that I could have said that he iterates it and then reiterates it several times throughout the course of the novel, just so you're really sure. It does feel like there is a position of sympathy for the Martians, and I kind of love the way that it's written that way. Like you understand why they're here, why they're doing what they're doing. Exactly.
They're not monsters. They're not inhuman. Their motivations are in many ways very human, even though they're physically and mentally they're not. We haven't described the plot to the audience because I'm assuming everyone knows what the plot is. Yeah. It's pretty much right there in the title because it's that famous. But like when I read the book as like a 10-year-old, I hadn't even seen the movies yet.
Yeah.
And so I was actually shocked by the ending. I thought that was so like mind-boggling. But reading it again as an adult, of course, he even telegraphs his twist ending several times. He discusses germs and their impact and things like that just to get you ready for it when it happens.
I love the ending of this book. I love that, all of our firepower, it didn't matter. It didn't matter. Once they drank the water and ate the food, the bacteria that their bodies could not handle is what wiped out the Martians.
It's weirdly anticlimactic, and people doing film versions, like they always leave out the beginning, the building of the suspense. They cut right to the tripods destroying things, and they find some way to do the end where there's somehow... they put a bang action scene at the end. When Spielberg did his version of it, he does in fact have them just dying from some earthly disease. But nevertheless, there's still a scene where Tom Cruise swings on the top of a tripod and blows it up with a grenade. Because, But
that's the thing. It's the Martians. They were so sophisticated. The only way man could win is the fact that we just have Earth on our side.
Yeah, that just, Although Wells himself was pretty much an atheist, and he would not have agreed with the 1953 version that literally said that God just wiped them out to protect humanity.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, Wells
he would have. No. He would have ripped the film apart on that one.
Oh, he would have hated that. Hollywood tends to do that to things.
I have even a quote about religion that is from War of the Worlds.
Yeah.
Be a man. What good is religion if it collapses under calamity? Think of what earthquakes and floods, wars and volcanoes have done before to men. Did you think that God had exempted us? He is not an insurance agent. Yeah. I love it. I love it so much. This book
God
is
is not
so
an
good.
insurance agent. That is like completely brilliant. Yeah, he's right. In Britain, they felt very smug and complacent about their place in society. Much like in our modern day, Americans tend to feel the same way. When September 11th happened, there was buildings in America can blow up too. How does that happen? Well, it happens because people with bombs blow things up. Yeah. And it happens in so many countries around the world. Because all of a sudden when it happens here, it's somehow, different.
Speaking of when it happens here, is now a good time to talk about the very famous radio broadcasts.
Yes.
The radio broadcast done by, of course, Orson Welles, no relation to H.G. Wells. No relation whatsoever.
Did meet,
it was a Halloween radio broadcast, and it was stated 3 times in the radio broadcast at the beginning, in the middle, and at the end that this is a radio teleplay of the novel War of the Worlds. It was updated, so that great quote at the beginning, instead of the 19th century, it's the 20th century, and instead of England, it's New Jersey.
Yes, because they always do that. The Tom Cruise one was set in America, of course.
America.
Yeah.
But it's in New Jersey.
Yeah.
And it was... I listened to it, and it was so fabulously done, especially for the 1930s. I can see how a couple people might have thought tuning in at the wrong time after the warnings or before the warnings could think that it might be possibly real. So they do this fabulous radio play of War of the Worlds where you have, 3 or 4 actors doing 8 different parts where they're coming in, doing different voices.
Yeah.
I love it. But they distorted them so it sounded like, yes, this person is being wired in and you've got the delays and everything. So it was a very well done radio podcast, not podcast, it was 1930s.
Yeah.
So it was a very well done radio play.
If they had it, Wells would have been doing podcasts.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, he
would have been the king. But so this radio play happens. Now, at this time, radio was very, very new. Mm-hmm. And the newspapers were very afraid that radio was going to completely wipe them out. However, there were a couple people who did tune into this radio broadcast at the wrong time, or they just completely ignored the fact that it was stated several times that this is a radio play of this novel. There was mass hysteria, or as the newspapers reported it, mass hysteria.
Yeah.
Except there wasn't. But there were a lot of people calling switchboard operators.
Yeah.
Because at that time, that's how you placed a phone call. You call up the switchboard operator, they plug you through.
Yeah.
I got to listen to a lot of the stories of switchboard operators from that night, from that October 30th radio broadcast, where they were talking about how people were calling, crying, saying, "Are they? Did the aliens just cross the George Washington Bridge?" They were freaking. People absolutely panicking. And the newspapers really took that story and blew it up, basically stating you can't trust anything that comes out of radio, and they sensationalized this story to the point, I think they said in the year after it happened, there were more than 30,000 newspaper articles written about this War of the Worlds broadcast and how it misleaded the public.
Yeah, the newspapers hit it hard.
Absolutely, but if you look at the actual the stats of that night, there weren't people jumping out of buildings. There were no hospitalizations or suicides due to the broadcast. They did prove that there was no increased police activity. There were, however, just increased calls to the police station.
Yeah.
And of course, the police at that time, after 2 people had called about aliens, they turned on the radio. And so it wasn't this crazy sensationalized panic in the streets that you think of. Because before I did any research, I thought, oh yeah, that broadcast.
No, it
people
was not
people
as
running around with
advertised.
looting because the aliens are here. But it is a fabulous, fabulous radio teleplay. I highly recommend. If you have an hour, listen to it. It's so good.
Well, if you were a British person, it does take place in very familiar ground. And Wells and his wife had bicycled across the British countryside. And so the terrain he describes is all completely accurate. Every river, every hill. He made records of what he saw. He jotted it down, all the details. But he lived not far from Woking, which is where much of the early action takes place. And to this day, there's a 23-foot tall statue of a tripod in the city's downtown area. That's
amazing. But that's the detail work in this novel.
Yeah.
It's these little details that make it feel so realistic. The fact that it is, although it is fiction based in scientific fact, and the fact that if you are from that area, and you're reading this and you're just like, that's what's going to happen. The farm down the road is going to. I do like just a minor character in this novel. I like the man who wants to live underground.
The artillery man.
The artillery man wants to live underground.
What a character. Yeah, he's kind of an analog to a survivalist. Like those people who are fans of zombies who really want the zombie apocalypse to occur. So they can get down to repopulating the earth and so forth. He's way too excited about the idea.
He's way too excited. He had started digging for his underground city. Yeah. And the narrator says, that's something I could have dug in an afternoon, and he's been working 2 days on it.
Yeah.
It's, but it's cool that you do. You have like this doomsday survivalist in this novel. It's very interesting the way people would react to this hypothetical.
Very accurate. Again, years before survivalism was a thing, he really caught it. The guy is actually completely pathetic and hopeless.
Oh, absolutely.
He talks a big game, but he's not capable of doing anything.
No, I'll dig for 2 hours, then I'll go in and I'll have a snack.
Yeah. And the other person he spends all that time with is the curate, the religious man, who gives him a chance to not really do digs at religion, but the curate is also, like the artillery man, completely useless. Worse than useless. He freaks out and has a panic attack and has to be bludgeoned into submission by our nameless hero.
Yeah. Well, that is, you're relying so much on faith that you can't take action.
Yeah.
And you feel completely powerless. You shut down.
Yeah.
That's how it is. And I do like that you get to see how, very different but very intense reactions.
Yeah, a hero basically kills him to silence him so the Martians won't find where they're hiding.
Yeah, for the greater good.
And it's a really horrific scene.
There's so many really horrific scenes.
Yeah, one after the other. The book is full of them. It's an extremely grim book and doesn't hold back on the details. I think he's very accurate about how people would react to things like that.
Yeah.
Like I said, invasion literature was a genre, but Wells was such a fabulous writer. He actually really caught the mass panic people just going insane when this sort of thing happens.
Yeah, we should remember how repulsive our carnivorous habits would seem to an intelligent rabbit.
Yeah,
that's the feel of the whole book. There's so much carnage.
Of course, the big secret we find 2/3 of the way through the book is that the Martians actually live off human blood, which I think technically makes them vampires.
It does. I think so. Where's that vampire novel?
Yes. They drain human beings' blood because they have no digestive system. Basically, the Martians consist of a brain. And they have eyes and they have tentacles for dragging them about. They have almost no body, just a head with tentacles, and they communicate telepathically. So they have a mouth for bringing in air, but they don't use it for speaking.
Yeah, they need some form of nutrients. We're mostly water. We're water kind of filled with minerals.
Yeah.
That's feasible.
Yeah, your blood is full of nutrients because you've already digested the food and absorbed the oxygen, so it can go right into somebody else's system and they'll be fine. They'll live off that. Yeah, makes perfect sense.
Makes perfect sense. I love it.
Yeah, again, from a scientific standpoint, he even talks about how they evolve. Being a student of Huxley, literally, he goes into how they might have developed this way. It all seems incredibly, terrifyingly plausible.
I know, but that's what's so great about this book.
Yeah.
It's just, surely if we had learned nothing else, this war has taught us pity. Pity for those witless souls that suffer under our dominion.
Yeah, if only Britain had taken the message that Wells was giving out, that the people under you deserve your respect.
The message that he's bludgeoning us over the head
harder than the priest in the book. Yeah. Ultimately, to give it a college graduate description, by showing an imperial power being the victim of imperialism, he calls into question the whole idea of being an imperial power in the first place. You say, what are you if this can happen to you? Well, you're exactly like the people that you now suddenly hate. There's no difference between the Martians and the British.
Yeah. No, it's absolutely true. It's just, they have come in, they will slaughter to get what they need.
Yeah.
It's absolutely what it is.
Yeah.
But in the nice, wrapped up aliens.
Yeah, so from the very beginning, the story has been told and retold. While it was still under copyright in England, a illegal version of it appeared in America, which shifted the action, of course, to America. There were at least 2 different pressings of this, which Wells was able to suppress. Immediately, literally, as soon as the book came out, people started doing unauthorized sequels. One of them that I've yet to get my hands on is Thomas Edison Goes to Mars, in which American inventor Thomas Edison reverse engineers Martian technology and leads a group of American Marines to the Red Planet to give those tentacle terrors what for.
Why can't Netflix buy the rights?
Yeah, I know.
I would watch 3 seasons of that.
Yeah, there's also a book about W.C. Grace, who is the preeminent cricket player of the time. Yeah. There's also a book where he takes on the Martians because, of course. That's just, it's not cricket the way they attacked his country. So, of course, he runs out there with his cricket bat.
Well, I think once the Martians were here, everyone had to fight the Martians.
Literally everyone did. And the thing has been filmed and refilmed. I was going to list how many different times it's been filmed.
No, it's too many. It's too many.
Because while I was looking away, I glanced away for a few minutes, and it came back, and they filmed it 5 or 6 more times. There are 2 different computer games.
Yep.
There is a current television series on Fox.
Is there really?
Yeah, there's running on Fox right now. Those War of the Worlds in name only. It has nothing to do with anything Wells wrote. There is a BBC version from a couple of years ago, which, as critics say, it is War of the Worlds, but it's mostly a Edwardian love story about a couple who defies stiff Edwardian society while tripods are destroying the country in the background.
Oh, well, that's a nice setting.
They spend almost as much time on the couple's relationship as they do the tripods.
That's insane.
It's insane, particularly since
I know you're in love, but there's tripods outside.
H.G. Wells cares so little about his characters. The lead character of this has no name. He is another nameless narrator, just like in Time Machine that we'll get to.
Yep.
No one has a name in the book except, weirdly, Ogilvy the astronomer.
Ogilvy, I know, and what a name.
Ogilvy is blessed with a name in this book. Aside from that, there's me, my brother, my wife, there's the curate, there's the artillery man, there's
Your name is your profession, but Ogilvy.
Yeah, and also filmed versions often have the hero encountering someone who's in charge. They inevitably run into a general who's giving commands.
Yes.
But in the original book, the guy wanders around and doesn't have a firm idea of what's going on. He'll stop people on the street and demand, have you heard the news? What has happened? And someone will fill him in on what they've just seen.
Well, because it is absolute chaos. This book is chaos, page 1 to last page.
Yeah, he never takes a stand or runs into anyone who can make a difference. That's how helpless he is. And that's the point that Wells was driving home. So it was done by Orson Welles as a radio play.
Yes.
After which it already been in print in America and through several different unauthorized versions.
It was fabulously popular.
Yeah. The George Powell version in 1953 with Gene Barry, very famous. He got rid of the tripods. He thought they looked too old-fashioned Victorian, so now they have big floating things, which look really cool.
Yeah.
Except weirdly, technically, if you've seen the 1953 version, those are tripods. Yeah. They have invisible energy legs. They have force field legs they walk on. And if you study a still, particularly in the Blu-ray version of it, you can actually see 3 wavy lines where the air is distorted underneath of the floating things.
That's awesome.
So technically, they were tripods in the 1953 version. And then when Spielberg did it, he went all out and gave them metal legs again. Because Spielberg didn't get away with that, gosh darn it.
Yes, he can.
Yes,
he can.
Yeah, the Tom Cruise War of the Worlds is bizarre in the sense that he changes virtually everything important about it. Pretty much every aspect. A hero has a name, a hero has a family, kids that he's worried about. And yet, surprisingly, Spielberg still hits every major beat of the book. Every important thing that in the book also happens to Tom Cruise's character. It just happens differently in a way that makes it more like an American action film.
Yeah.
Yeah. And critics have been upset about when he believes his son is dead and then is mysteriously reunited with his son for no reason in the end. But that's exactly how the book ends.
Yeah.
After being told his wife is dead, he wanders back to find the ruins of their house, discovers that she's still there and she's fine.
Yeah. She's A-okay. She made it.
You can't blame Spielberg for that one. The Jeff Wayne did a progressive rock opera based on it.
I've listened to the soundtrack. It's so amazing? Good. It's good.
It's huge. Yeah. There was a play. I think it only played on the West End, but there was a stage musical based on it.
Yeah. No. And the soundtrack. It hits every single major point.
Every point is there. Yeah. It'll be continued to be filmed and done again and again. I have brought a plethora of books.
I'm so excited about it.
I love my spin-offs and crossovers. And
I love your spin-offs and crossovers, so I'm excited.
War of the Worlds so ignited the imagination. Like I said, before it was even in print in America, when it was just out in England, unauthorized copies are already hitting the stands and imitations of it and so forth. This one is put out by Osprey, who does a lot of stuff for military, like tabletop, things like that. And this is a, quote, history book, looking back on those, how our ancestors dealt with the first Martian invasion.
That's awesome.
Everything is looked at as if it's from the 21st century, looking back on those days. It has period photographs and maps and sketches of things.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's gorgeous. Again, it treats it all like it actually really happens. They refer to H.G. Wells as our most important war correspondent.
I love it.
Now, I've already mentioned Sherlock Holmes' War of the Worlds. That shows what Sherlock Holmes and Professor Challenger were doing during the Martian invasion, because, of course, they weren't just sitting on their hands.
No. The Martians are here. Time to work.
Yeah, it goes well beyond that, though. The Massacre of Mankind by Stephen Baxter. This is an authorized sequel. The estate of H.G. Wells actually authorized this one. Baxter is a fabulous writer. He loves H.G. Wells. His flaw with doing a authorized sequel is that his writing style is nothing like Wells.
Yeah.
He can't really bring himself to imitate Wells' style in any way, shape, or form. It's a well-written book. It's very good, but it doesn't feel like a sequel to War of the Worlds. So the prolific Kevin J. Anderson did a story which has H.G. Wells fighting the Martians. So this time it's H.G. Wells fighting the Martians because the narrator has no name, so you might as well assume that it's H.G. Wells himself doing it. We'll encounter that again when we discuss the time machine. So in this one, H.G. Wells teams up with Huxley, his old professor, and Dr. Moreau, and the Invisible Man to take on the Martians.
Oh, what an A-team.
Well, it sounds it sounds suspiciously like he's ripping off this book, which came first, which is the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, Volume 2, in which the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, Mina Harker, the Invisible Man, again, and Captain Nemo, and so forth and so on, and mostly Mr. Hyde in this one. Yes. This is when Mr. Hyde shines, take on the Martian invaders. Again, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen by Alan Moore, brilliant work. So Kevin J. Anderson, not to be outdone, also edited War of the Worlds Global Dispatch.
Is this all the other locations that they hit?
The thing is, in War of the Worlds, many people pointed out that if you're actually trying to conquer a planet, you don't make all your cylinders land in one country.
Yeah. Well, they say there's multiple, there's
We're told that, but we never actually hear about anything except England. So in this one, that goes through what happens when the Martians landed in various other parts. And,
I want to know what happened in Italy, Canada.
People, so what if Jules Verne, Mark Twain, and Emily Dickinson took on the Martians?
Yes.
Now that's an A-team. I would pay to see that, man.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, so it's War of the Worlds Global Dispatches. One of my favorites when I was a kid. And I'm really happy these are still in print, so kids today can read them. Are you familiar with the Tripod series?
I am not.
Yes, by John Christopher. These are fantastic books. It was made into a series by the BBC.
Okay.
Basically, the Martians come back and take over Earth.
Yeah.
And it's set generations after that. They're not even called Martians anymore. No one knows anything about them because the characters in the book are all raised in these concentration camps.
Okay.
And when they reach a certain age, they have a process done to them that's essentially a lobotomy.
All right.
Yeah, and so that way they're kept docile and peaceful, so they can be domesticated like cattle.
Okay, so this is was an early dystopian novel. Yes.
So it's a YA book. So naturally, a couple of coming of age characters don't really want to go through this process, even though everyone does it. And they discover there's actually resistance out there trying to fight the tripods. And so they run away from the only home they've ever known to go into the wilderness to try to join up with this resistance movement to fight against the tripods. They don't even know what's running the tripods because they're raised that ignorantly. Yeah,
it's the blood-sucking Martians.
Yeah. Well, they found little by little they started to find out exactly what's going on. It's a trilogy, and he's also written a prequel showing exactly how they conquered the Earth. It's very well done. One of my favorites, it's been adapted to comic books, it's been adapted to animation. One of my favorite graphic novels is Scarlet Traces by Ian Edgerton. It's brilliant. It shows what happens after the Martians are defeated. Well, what happens? England uses the advanced Martian technology, which only they have, to immediately conquer the parts of the world that aren't already a part of the British Empire. Mm-hmm. They have a heat beam that actually can destroy anything on the Earth.
Yeah.
And this is someone riding around London in his multi-legged vehicle.
I was going to say, he looks very Doc Ock.
Exactly, yes. They've mastered the use of those steel tentacles the tripods walked on. So now every cabbie in London has his tripod thing that he pilots down the street. But of course, a gentleman adventurer who fought the Martians back in the day discovers that the bodies of women are being pulled from the Thames with the blood drained from them. As if perhaps all the Martians aren't gone.
Ooh.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And since the British government has become much more fascist after the invasion and paranoid, no one really wants him to investigate.
We've defeated the Martians and we have all their technology. We are still the greatest.
Yes, exactly. So there's been a lot of different takes on War of the Worlds, but there's one that's absolutely unique that I had to bring up because I loved it when I was a kid. When I was 12, I thought this was the greatest comic book ever. Many people have asked what happened if the Martians came back. How would you fight against it? What kind of heroes would stand up to them? But it took Marvel Comics to say, what if the Martians came back and took over the world, but they were opposed by a guy with a sword and a bandolier of throwing stars across his chest?
Yes.
It's Killraven.
Yes.
Killraven. It's set in the Earth, again, after the Martians have landed and taken over. Humanity has been enslaved, and a guy who's a gladiator, trained to fight for his master's amusement, manages to escape and joins a ragtag group of rebels and fights back against the Martian overlords, armed with a sword. They have tripods with heat beams. He has a sword and throwing stars. But
he also has fire in his belly and plot armor.
He does. He totally does. Don McGregor was a great writer. I love his ability to take this absurd idea absolutely, completely seriously. There was nothing tongue-in-cheek about it. It's the most ridiculous idea I've ever seen, but it's so well done. And the art is by P. Craig Russell, who is just brilliant. Apparently no one told P. Craig Russell that Marvel comics aren't supposed to look like pre-Raphaelite paintings. I mean, just flip through this.
I know. I was already saying, like,
gorgeous book.
I was like, look at that bone structure. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
It is a fantastically gorgeous book. You do the monthly comic book for a long time.
That is awesome.
And after the series was canceled, they allowed him to have the graphic novel to tie up the loose ends.
Just look at that. It's just insane.
Yeah, with the graphic novel, he had time, instead of the monthly schedule, to actually really paint every single panel, basically.
Oh my gosh.
It is absolutely amazing.
This is beautiful.
Yeah.
That is awesome.
And because it's the Marvel Universe, Killraven has crossed over with other superheroes. So if you really wanted to see Spider-Man fight a Martian tripod, he did in fact travel to Killraven's future in an issue of Marvel Team Up.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and Killraven's also fought alongside Captain America.
That's awesome.
Yeah, when Cap got time lost, the two of them took on the Martians together. So, yeah. So the War of the Worlds is one of those ideas that just keeps giving. People will never stop finding new ways to interpret it. But no one should forget what Wells originally wrote it about. The dangers of imperialism are still with us, many ways just as much today as they were in those days.
Hold on, I've got one to close us out.
Yes.
And we men, the creatures who inhabit this earth, must be to them at least as alien and lowly as are the monkeys and lemurs to us.
Yep.
The intellectual side of man already admits that life is an incessant struggle for existence, and it would seem that this too is the belief of the minds upon Mars. Their world is far gone in its cooling, and this world is still crowded with life, but crowded only with what they regard as inferior animals. To carry welfare sunward is indeed their only escape from the destruction that generation after generation creeps upon them.
Yeah, very well put.
War of the Worlds.
Yes,
I'm
War
so
of the Worlds
happy.
Everyone should read it, and it's short so everyone can read it. And there just happens to be a audible audiobook version of it narrated by David Tennant.
Yes.
So there's no reason for anyone not to listen to that, literally.
I mean, what more could you want? What
Absolutely.
more could you want?
So we'll be back next time to talk more about H.G. Wells and his fabulous work. Until then, I have been Ed.
I have been Michaela.
And take care and be safe.
Be happy, be healthy.
Bye.
Bye.